Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning on our legal lounge conversations. Very excited to be running a webinar with three absolute female powerhouses of branding and legal and marketing. So this is a really exciting opportunity for me and a real privilege to be with our lovely panelists. So to move swiftly to our introduction then, my name's Amy Kingham. I'm the Global Compliance Manager here at PromoVeritas. And today I will be chairing the conversation between Louise Blake, the Senior Legal from Europe, Counsel from Kellanova, or what we might know as Kellogg's and Pringles and all of their other associated brands, Hina Parmar, the Counsel for UK and Ireland for Mondelez, and Bethan Price, the Legal Director at PepsiCo. So welcome, ladies. Thank you very much for joining us. So whilst you get yourselves and everybody gets themselves settled in, I just quickly wanted to touch on what the current and future challenges are for brands with promotions. Now, you might have noticed that our three speakers today are from HFSS brands. So I wanted to speak to that just momentarily about what the regulations are in place currently and what they are due to look like coming in October 2025. So at the moment, if you walk into a supermarket, you might have noticed that there are restrictions regarding where HFSS products can be placed within a store, through from the car park itself to the entrance to where the checkouts are. No HFSS products within a couple of meters. And then potentially you might have noticed that bog-off promotions have been restricted, and multi-buys and what that looks like. And that's down to the changes in regulations. And what's coming into effect in October 2025 are some much more stringent requirements regarding how and when HFSS, or we should be using the new terminology now, less healthy food and drink, LHFD products, can or really can't be advertised. So we're looking here at nothing between 5:30 in the morning and 9 p.m. at night. There's basically a watershed on those products that quantify as being advertised. Anywhere on landing pages and online checkouts, on all on-demand television, and then actually extends beyond that, from beyond broadcasting and television adverts through to any paid for online advertising, whether that is just promoting a post or using an influencer, maybe banner ads that you've bid on, Google ads, etc., are no longer going to be permitted from October 25. So really, for HFSS brands in particular, there are some other requirements that we have to consider around how you run those promotions. But that's not why we're here today necessarily. We understand that some of you aren't from HFSS brands, so we want you to be able to join in and feel welcome as part of this conversation as well. So the first one will be quite poignant. I always joke that in the legal team, we are potentially seen as where creative comes to die, or the wall upon which creative ideas crashes upon. So I'm interested to hear, ladies, what you think could be done to maybe help improve that relationship between marketing and legal teams, or maybe is it a necessary evil? Must we have that position as a legal? Bethan, if you don't mind, I will come to you first.
Of course. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for inviting me here today. So I think for me, it's key to become a trusted advisor with the marketing team. They want, I want to be seen as someone that they can trust. They want to come to, not as a tick box at the end of the process when they've already got a promotion that's pretty much ready to go and I must just give it an approval. So I think to become a trusted advisor, it's really important to get yourself involved at an early stage where the marketing team are coming up with a weird and wonderful campaigns that they are. Often that is by getting yourself along to activation boards or any meetings where they're talking about potential promotions. And if there's something that you think, oh, that doesn't sound quite right, or I'd be interested to know a bit more, just reaching out and kind of saying, let's have a quick chat about that, just to make sure that we're involved and that we can guide and steer you at the right way before it's too late and before it really becomes a problem. And I think it's just, ensuring that you're providing as commercial advice as possible as well. There are some times where, a promotion is just so out there that you hope to God that it goes away at some point, but that you can provide that kind of balance of the legal view plus the commercial reality, and just be realistic about where, potential issues will come up and how much of a risk they are. Because I think if you're just always seen as a no, 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 they're just not going to want to come to you. But if you can help them and help steer them at an earlier stage, I always find that is a good way of becoming a trusted advisor and someone that they want to work alongside. And we're more likely to get to the right solution in the end without me having to be the bad person in the room.
Precisely there. I've always said the position should at least very much try and be not like that, but rather than no, from a mindset. I mean, Hina, have you a similar opinion?
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything Bethan just said. I was thinking about this, and I think actually at Mondelez we do it quite well in terms of our marketers bringing legal along the journey with them, so engaging us, right at the start of a campaign, bringing us into those discussions, and I think it helps marketing understand at the outset what sort of the guardrails are and the kind of issues that have come up, but for legal to also understand the what and why behind a campaign. Like, so what's the purpose of this campaign? What are they trying to achieve? So when we do come to advise them on compliance, we can kind of, as you said, Bethan, tailor that advice so we can bring that sort of what the legal standpoint is, but also what commercially works. So we kind of get to a stage where, we're not killing that idea, as you said, but we're going to make it work, but in a compliant way. And then the other thing I think that really helps in terms of our relationship with our marketeers at Mondelez is, training and empowering them to take ownership. So we regularly train our marketeers and compliance with the CAP code and things like that. And training is not just always, we have an annual training, formal training, but also, we do things like send them monthly newsletters, legal marketing updates, which show things like ASA rulings, and also learnings from our own campaigns that, things that might have not, what worked well, what didn't work so well from a compliance perspective. And it sort of empowers them to know then when they come to us at a later stage that it will sort of ring a bell to say, oh yeah, I remember we did that on the last campaign, and maybe we can do things differently. And also our internal marketing policies that we have, which are based around the CAP code, almost or sometimes go further than the CAP code, are owned by our own marketing teams. So we have a marketing to kids policy, which marketing owns. So again, it gives them that sense of ownership and empowers them to make them just those decisions. So when they do come to us, it's almost just as a sounding board rather than oh gosh, we have to go to legal when they're going to say no.
And Louise, how is it that you work alongside your marketing team? Does that reflect what happens at Kellanova?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. And, I'm always saying, fostering that early collaboration. I would much rather be brought in too early than too late. And nobody wants kind of nasty surprises once you've already invested time, money, as well. And like Hina was saying, I think sometimes bringing to life the realities or, some current examples are always a great way of doing that. And, making marketeers sort of live to the fact that, yeah, this isn't a case of, legal. We're not intentionally out there to be blockers. And then, yeah, once you kind of have developed that great rapport, like any relationship, I guess, based on the trust. We're kind of there to listen, understand exactly what the goals are, and that will help us, tailor our advice and use expertise from past experience and be able to really foresee those potential bumps along the road. I guess essentially to drive efficiency on both sides, and always, I think, using that creative approach. I think one of my favorites is when you get oh, you should be a marketer. It's always a nice little quip, but it's not this legal versus marketing, but really it's a collaborative effort.
That's exactly it. We don't want to be an us and them. It's how we collaborate together. And I think you guys absolutely hit it on the head. The three takeaways for me are understand the context, what they're trying to achieve and why, and how as a legal team you can support them on that. you've both all said, get involved early, like let's get part of the concept, and whether you come up with some of the creative ideas and guide that conversation, or you're becoming that trusted advisor to help them feel like you are on board with the process. And make sure your team take a little bit of accountability, and that they are trained and educated so that that guides some maybe their creative ideas from the beginning. So love it. Thank you very much, ladies. So the next question then is the considerations for social media campaigns. You know, how do we keep them compliant with all of those other relevant regulations? So Hina, to you first. I know that Mondelez promotions tend to evoke a lot of user-generated content. What are the considerations there for you as a company, and how do you operate around those?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's inherently challenges when we run sort of user-generated content campaigns. We ran a really successful one this year with Cadbury celebrating 200 years, where we invited consumers to submit photos of themselves, so heritage photos of them with a Cadbury product, which was really well received and really well done. But I think for us, it's getting the balance right between not stifling creativity and authenticity, but still staying compliant with the CAP code. So whether it's things like, you know, not protecting our brand in terms of harm and offence, or people posting things that are probably not what you want associated with your brand, to things like, you know, not appealing to children, etc., with us being a HFSS product. So it's about getting that balance between letting consumers, you know, drive that content, but at the same time being compliant. And I think that's when things like having an effective moderation policy come in. Yeah. We've seen campaigns in the past where this has gone wrong. I don't know, you might be familiar with the Walker's Wave campaign, where this went quite wrong. So it's things like, you know, hopefully having an effective moderation policy up front, so you can kind of filter out that content before it goes live. And also having that in your T's and C's as well. So saying, you know, these are the unacceptable things that we won't accept in terms of entry. So people say on upfront, but also have active enforcement of it as well.
So you mentioned the marketing to children aspect of things there, and Bethan, I know that obviously previously PepsiCo have run partnerships promotions with other brands or films or entities that maybe appeal to children. Is that a real consideration for you as a company?
Yes, absolutely. So we have in the past, and, you know, continue to work with third parties on our promotions. That could be, you know, a film or a TV show, a attractions, you know, place. And we just always have to work closely with our marketeers, especially where these promotions include or are predominantly with HFSS products. When it comes to the advertising of those promotions, you know, are we targeting children? And I think you often have to think about the content itself of the ad, but also where you're targeting it. So, you know, we did do a Ghostbusters promotion on our snacks products in the past, and it, you know, we really had to come up with our position in terms of, are we comfortable that having these licensed characters, for example, on our packs and in advertising isn't in breach of the CAP code, and what is our rationale for these adverts being focused at over 16s as opposed to children. And, you know, there are arguments that you can definitely make, and it will depend on the you know, who you're working with and what it is you're showing, I think. So it's very case by case specific. And, you know, very interesting that the recent ASA case on cheese strings held that Garfield, even though their argument was that this was nostalgic, focused toward adults, actually they found that to be a licensed character that was appealing to under 12. So I think that gives us really cause for thought as we proceed with any future campaigns, as to looking at that argument a little bit more carefully, perhaps, and really who is the target of some of the content that we're putting out there. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see as we reformulate more and more of our projects to non-HFSS. You know, we may focus some of our partner promotions only on non-HFSS products, and that's an interesting one in itself, isn't it? Because to a consumer may not well know the difference, and that we have reformulated our package, our product, and how, you know, and when is it appropriate to to look at the content and who we are targeting, and that's a company policy, as well as the new laws, the new cap code rules that will come into place, and we'll be working really closely with our corporate comms teams, with our marketeers, to create a policy that we think is correct in terms of whether you go further than what the cap codes, or whether that we ensure that we at least as a minimum reflect the new rules, and that's something that we're working on internally, as I'm sure the others are as well.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I find along with all of that is, as you referred to working with the comms teams, it's how a promotion is communicated. And Louise, I know that from a Kellanova perspective, it's all about how it's communicated. And what are your considerations for social media around that, and the space in which you have to play in how much room you have to be able to communicate everything?
Exactly, and I think that's a really frequent challenge that we're often faced against, particularly with social media, where you've limited space, and from a marketing point of view, you don't want T's and C's kind of taking over or detracting from the overall messaging. So again, it's that balancing act, and unfortunately, as often as they might try, I think asterisk T's and C's apply is unlikely to cut it. So I think, you can often take it as read that things like age restrictions, geographical restrictions, closing date, how to participate, number of nature prizes, those kind of things are going to need to be included. And it's the challenge of incorporating those within the space you have available. And I guess particularly when brands are kind of looking at unique ways of doing the promotions, and that might mean more complex mechanics or prize tier structures, particularly if you're getting into the realms of things like subscriptions for third-party services, for instance, which might have you're offering a free trial period, but then there might be a requirement for things like credit card details, and then you're signed up to a subscription, which we all know is very territory where those things really need to be flagged up front and in advance. Or I know another one that we've looked at together recently is around offering vouchers, for example, which might then require things like a claim by date, a redeem by date, an expiry date, which all start to become more complex and are really adding to your word count. So I think it's that maintaining clarity and efficiency without kind of detracting from the overall appeal. And I think Hina, yesterday you made a really good point of trying in as much as possible to encourage your marketeers to include as much of that information in the ad itself. You're going to want to let consumers know how to participate and how to engage in the promotion. So if you can already include that in the image, for instance, that'll free up less T's and C's space.
Or for the other bits of information, but absolutely, you were saying precisely that, weren't you? Excellent. Okay, so moving on then. Now, some of you, maybe more than others, on attending this will be thinking about already running international campaigns. So it's certainly something that we wanted to touch upon the expertise of these three women here today. Louise, staying with you, obviously Kellanova runs a lot of multi-country promotions, and I believe Pringles is across approximately 39 markets for every promotion you run. So what advice would you give to people about how it is you manage it, how you support on achieving that goal of running in as many markets as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think starting point is planning is going to be critical. And I think spending the time doing that initial scoping exercise and understanding the markets that you're working with is really critical. And of course, getting great advice and great local advice so that you can understand the local nuances, requirements, which of course are changing over time and you need to keep up to date with, so that you can take that on board and then understand how you go about navigating, maybe how best to cluster markets, for instance, depending on their specific requirements. I know in Pringles, for instance, we split between test of skill mechanics and game of chance mechanics within the one promotion to adapt to local requirements. And then even thinking about your prize, there could be implications there. I know cash is a frequent one that comes up, that there might be restrictions on whether that's feasible in other markets. And really, I think it's understanding, especially particularly time or resource intensive nuances. So in the likes of Italy, for instance, where there are really extensive registration requirements, the need for technical affidavits, even so far as the impact on your business's data protection structure, location of servers, those are all things you need to know well in advance and be able to map out your ways of working with key partners, all playing a role.
And your partnerships team are brilliantly well versed when they work with us, and it's a lovely seamless process now, and everybody always is familiar. And there's possibly between us all a bit of an eye roll when Italy gets mentioned, because we know it can be quite a complex market. But there are certainly, when people are versed in it and you all support, and it's easy enough to manage, and we work with you really well with it all. But not everyone's as difficult as Italy, and we look as close as our neighbours in the Republic of Ireland. And Hina, obviously that's part of your remit in your role. What are your thoughts on running promotions in Ireland? Are they as easy as the UK?
Yeah, I mean, yep. So I'm in a UK and Ireland team. So what I would say is, don't forget about Ireland. It's often a kind of afterthought when you're running these really UK centric campaigns, and then you can think, oh yes, we need to include Ireland as well. And obviously there are different rules there in terms of requiring a lottery's license if the prize value is over a certain amount, or considering if there's a no purchase necessary route to sort of avoid that need for a lottery's license. But it's kind of factoring that in, where I'm making sure the marketers are aware of that and factoring that in those early planning stages, so they're not just seen as an add-on. And also I think often, I mean, Louise and Bethan, you probably agree with this, often we are giving out that common sense advice in terms of practical things that the team should consider. So things like, if you're giving away a holiday, for example, but all the departure airports are from the UK, I think you probably end up with a lot of annoyed Irish consumers who can't have a local airport, have to travel to Heathrow to get, to claim that prize. So there's always things like that to remember as well, especially when you're combining UK and Ireland as in one sort of activation. There are a lot of sort of considerations we need to kind of make sure that we are thinking of them quite separately as well.
Giving them the equal opportunity to feel loved and participated as the rest of the UK.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, Bethan, I know PepsiCo are in a position where you do have one of those lottery licenses to run in the Republic of Ireland. I'm assuming that was a very conscious decision in order to not have to worry about all of those prize value restrictions. But also, how do you work with other markets, not just the ROI? So two parts to your question, I'm afraid.
That's okay. Yeah, so we do have a license and we've had it for numerous years, and we have debated a number of times whether we should continue to have one. But I think on balance, given that we are so linked up between the UK and Ireland, and the prizes are becoming often, of greater and greater value, cash being one of the ones that we see time and time again, I think on balance, it makes sense for us to have a lottery license. Just to echo Hina's point on, thinking about Ireland, they can become an afterthought, and often when our distribution processes don't allow for a separation between the UK and Ireland. So it's really important that we do consider them. And, just an administrative example that came up before, we've got a promotion perhaps with a Burger King, and then we realize actually Burger King and present in Ireland, or the franchise is owned by a different party, and therefore you can't just assume that someone can go and get their free burger in Ireland. So things like that quite often come up, and it's surprising that they can still be an oversight there. So always worth a flag. And then globally, as PepsiCo, is a global brand, and often you will see a global promotion having been negotiated in the US and then distributed across the world. And it's just, often there's a dispute around, or not a dispute, but a debate around who gets the prize promotion pools and where they should sit in each country. And it's just important that at a local level, you're not doing something that is inconsistent with or doesn't work from a global perspective. So we try and work very closely with our global team, making sure that we have eyes on the contract, making sure that then as it comes down and filters down to local T's and C's, we're not doing anything that is isn't allowed under the global kind of agreed terms, but also that we're catering for our local requirements.
Lots of planning, lots of communication. I'm sensing a theme amongst all of these different questions here. So on to the next question then, and this is one that we always find at PromoVeritas is a line to balance on. How do we keep this consumer-centric language? How do we make our terms and conditions easy to understand and consumable while still keeping everything legal and to a degree protecting our brands? Hina, what's your view on this one?
I think this goes back to that whole, as you say, the question says that customer-centric language, and being involved at the start with that conversation in marketing in terms of what you're trying to achieve here and how we communicate that. I think Louise touched on it on another answer, but it's that point around most of the things in significant conditions, for example, what you're required to put, up front, the Section 8 of the CAP code is kind of what you want to tell your consumer anyway. You want to tell them, what prizes you're offering. Of course, you want to tell them that. You need to tell them how you can get those prizes, how you can enter, when can you get those prizes, closing date. So a lot of that thing should be incorporated into that discussion anyway. So there's no need for it to be sort of reserved to the legal bit and the T's and C's, where I think you can actually be creative with it and incorporate it into your significant conditions without it being sort of obstructing like the main message and the creativity of the campaign. And I think even with the T's and C's, I mean, I know most people say, well, who reads them anyway? But I think, if something goes wrong, then someone will read them. So you need to make sure that they are sort of clearly drafted, that a layperson can understand them, and they have to be practical, right? Like everyone wants to know if they want a prize, when will I get it? How long am I waiting? I'm giving you all this data. What are you going to do with it? Like the kind of stuff that, we as a consumer would want to know. I think we just need to see it through that lens.
Precisely that. And Louise, that's something you've mentioned before. As a consumer, let's put ourselves in the consumer's shoes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like take a step back, and I think it's always a good gauge if I'm reading something and I have a doubt about, wait a second, how is this mechanic working? So I take this step, and then what happens? And I think if you have a doubt, I think that's a good gauge of how it's likely to be interpreted. So yeah, take a step back, put yourself in the shoes of a consumer, and make it understandable.
Terminology for sure. And with that terminology, Bethan, how do you feel that flows through to the legalese in a call to action? What are the considerations there that we have to make?
Yeah, obviously the call to action, you're very limited, right? You want to get the consumer's engagement straight away. So, things to think about are, how many words, and really can you, for the purposes of call to action, create something very punchy that maybe has some potential, or you're not as clear as you'd like to be. So, but that you can then clarify that at the back of pack, for example. That's quite often how we would work it in practice. So, take a view on front of pack, making clear you're not being inconsistent or, with your back of pack, but then give some further information. And I think it's things sometimes like it's common sense, as has been said, win prizes every hour, but there's only one prize to win, but you're talking about multiple prizes. So let's just kind of think about that in terms of common sense approach. And they won't want to add an extra word or but it's just, well, let's just reflect what we're actually doing. It's not a big deal often, but we just want to be clear to consumers.
Yeah, question how a consumer would read it themselves, and can it be interpreted multiple ways, and therefore is some of the accuracy potentially lost? So from that, it actually leads really nicely into our next question about the win terminology, apologies, that could be either the most effective or sometimes for us in legal, maybe the most challenging for promotions. And calls to action, Louise, are a consideration for you around maybe just the phrase win itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's interesting sometimes with our pan-European promotions, kind of seeing how some local markets, might not put that English interpretation, win by virtue, indicates that there is some element of losing, it's not a guaranteed win. Whereas in France, for instance, I know our colleagues there are quite conscious to always, I think their translation is a little bit closer to a try to win. So we do incorporate chance to win, particularly where there are, a reference to, say, multiple prizes. But like Bethan has indicated, if there are restrictions then maybe on what each individual can win, or if there are time restrictions in that example of the, winning every 90 minutes, but actually it's only open between 9 to 5, and again making all of that clear up front. And I guess always sort of bearing in mind like the other provisions of the CAP code and the relevant rules, that we can't be contradictory from what we have in the call to action is always good to bear in mind.
And Bethan, what's your position on things like everyone wins, or in that reference to chance to win? If perhaps everybody gets something, but what they get is different. What's the PepsiCo approach on that?
Yeah, because we know that the CAPCO covers what should be referenced as a gift versus a prize. But we have run promotions where, as you say, everyone gets something, but actually the value of what you get will vary considerably. And so in those cases, we feel comfortable that actually everyone is going to win something, and therefore that it is a prize, even though it is not very limited to who gets it, but actually there's going to be a considerable difference in what they win, but that everyone gets something.
And Hina, does that align with Mondelez's approach?
Actually, our approach differs to PepsiCo's approach on that one. So I think one of the challenges we do have, as has been said, is those multi-tier prize kind of promotions where you're winning things of different value. You may be offering things to everyone, and there's a chance to win other things. But in terms of if we are offering something to a significant proportion or everyone, something like a 20% off or whatever it is, we tend to always say that's defined as a gift or reward. So we need to distinguish that from those chance to win prizes, and make sure that's really clear up front that everyone can get this reward, but there's a chance to win a prize. So we always are careful in making sure we make that a distinction between everyone wins and chance to win.
And I know, Louise, when we've discussed this before, you've said for you it's very much dependent on maybe the mechanic and the value of the prize. So it'd be interesting, obviously answer with you first, Louise. Is there a nuance to it for all three of you? Does that form part of your consideration, or is there just a standard policy that you feel that your company has to stick to?
Yeah, I think for me anyway, it's really a case by case assessment, like, understanding what it is. Is it, one prize and you're communicating in that instance a simple win message, because that is, true for all entrants, that can easily work. But I would say on the whole, where you do start getting into those more complex tiered approaches, or I know more recently, the teams are maybe looking at prize pools that kind of change over the course of the promotion. But it's coming back to, well, what are you communicating in your overall call to action? Is that still relevant and true for the whole duration? So I think, like most things, it tends to be more of a case by case.
I can see you nodding there, Bethan. Is there room for nuance when you have an approach? To sometimes you think, and does that come from experience or gut feel about how and when you feel the communication would be possible to change or not?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all on a case by case basis, and it is very nuanced. And sometimes, you will get, uh, challenged by your marketing team, and ultimately you can give advice, right? That's what we say we do, and we work together, but ultimately it's marketing's decision. So these kind of things, often there's a gray area, right? You can advise on the cap good on based on previous experience where we haven't been challenged, but of course there is a possibility of challenge in the future. So I think it's just, you do have to look at each one individually and tailor your advice accordingly. And often we operate in the grey world, and it's important that we, you know, and that we advise on what that risk is as well, because that's really relevant. The cap code, when it comes to more reputational risk as opposed to any kind of financial, there are calls to be made, and we will work with our teams to make those calls often to get to the outcome they want whilst operating within guardrails. But we don't tend to have set policies. We will look at things on a case by case basis, because I think then we can be most effective when working with our colleagues.
And who has the final call at Mondelez? Is it on the marketers' heads, be it, or does legal get to say absolutely not in this instance?
No, I think it seems like we the three of us have a similar approach in terms of where there as giving that risk assessment to say where this falls in terms of risk, but ultimately it does fall on marketing to make that final call based on what our risk assessment is on that.
And that's precisely the same as PromoVeritas. Our view is always, we're providing advice on just one piece of the puzzle, and that's compliance. There are many other business objectives. So the very least we could do is provide you with everything to aid our clients to make that fully informed decision, be that with your companies or others. That's where we would sit in the same boat. So I think all four of us align on that one. So our final question before we move to the Q&As in, and it's just a really short but sweet, simple answer from all three of you. Why is it that your brands run so many promotions? What's behind it? And Louise, let's come to you first.
Yeah, I think for us it really comes back to brand engagement, loyalty, creating excitement. And I personally love seeing how our brands are continuously trying to offer unique opportunities. Maybe it's a good sign, if we're looking at something and thinking, oh wow, cool, I'd really love to win this. I think the employee restriction is probably in there for a good reason. But yeah, and it can be interesting to see that, it can be these money can't buy experiences, which can create that loyalty, and that can vary from, maybe a limited number of high value lucrative prizes, or on the opposite end of the scale, like something with much larger number, low value, but meaning that everybody, maybe receives a gift or has a much higher chance of winning. I think that that's really interesting to see, and always tracking performance of the promotions can really help our brands understand our consumers and what resonates.
And Bethan, what about you? What is it that has PepsiCo create so many wonderful promotions?
Yeah, very much the same as Louise. What I think is really interesting is how our promotions often change to reflect what's going on in broader society. So we've certainly seen an increase in, cash prizes with, the socioeconomic kind of reflection of the market at the moment. So, you know, that's where we see incredibly high engagement. What comes with that is also a lot of challenges as well, and, you know, complaints. So we have to balance this. But I think, yeah, we're definitely seeing an increase in promotions, an increase in working with third parties to gain that engagement and interest. And they're often keen to get that exposure on packs and in our advertising. So there's real kind of appetite to look further than just within PepsiCo, and also what we offer as prizes just changes all the time, and I think that's exciting for us as well as consumers.
And Hina, you mentioned the 200-year anniversary. Were promotions a big part of that? And is what else drives you as a Mondelez brand to run those promotions?
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation with a marketer yesterday. I posed the question to them and we had a really good conversation, and sort of three things came out of that conversation. So the first being, you know, brand relevance during cultural moments. So it's things like, you know, Christmas and the football season, but also celebrating our brands as well. So the 200-year anniversary, which, you know, brings the consumer into kind of that world and makes them feel part of something. And also we talked about sort of perceived value add. So at a time when, you know, prices are going up and you know, the shrinkflation, all that kind of stuff, it kind of helps the consumer to feel like they're still getting value for money when they have that, you know, that win message and, you know, an opportunity to win a prize. And it also helps in terms of the store environment. You unlock additional features in store if you have a promotion and things like that. So it helps your product or brand show up in ways that it may not if you weren't running that promotion.
Well, I mean, we are incredibly honoured to, full disclosure, work with all of you on your brand promotions, and we find them exceptionally exciting. I think my favourite one recently is the miniature Uno cards with Kellogg's cereals. I lost my mind. I used to play that so much as a child, so to see branded ones, and I think that refers to the point of it doesn't have to be huge value prizes all the time. You know, giving away holidays is great fun, but sometimes just seeing loads of people go nuts for these individual unique branded products that don't have to cost the earth is also exceptionally exciting. So ladies, I want to thank you so much. That has been wonderfully insightful. Do you know what, that wraps us up very well actually, because it's now 2:45. So by all means, you can see here that there is an email address. If any of those are questions that we could gain insights from our wonderful speakers, then I'm sure I can push the questions out to you to get your feedback as well. Just another thank you for your time and your thoughts. It's been very insightful, and thank you everybody for attending.